Well, I didn't plan on doing this one so quick, but it's came up several times already as I'm thinking about things. So let's look at the IIS Web Server. Last video we looked at IIS Express. This one we're just going to show you there is the possibility with Windows, even of a Windows 10 or a home version, of getting the IIS Web Server installed. It doesn't have to be Windows Server. If you go to like add, well, let me get to where you can see the desktop. That'd be nice, wouldn't it? If you go to like add or remove programs, and there's different ways to get there in Windows, as you know. You have to dig around sometimes, but if I go like programs and features there at the top right, this thing pops up, and one way to get there is this turn Windows features on or off. So I'm clicking that, and you will find in your Windows features that you're going to find some Internet Information Service things. You can see them there, and that of course is your IIS stuff. You could click them all and take defaults, and as you grow there'll be more tools you want to install or not install, but click that and you'll at least have an IIS server running on your machine. And for now we'll let it go at there. That we might get into authentication and other things you need to turn on, but if you get that installed, you'll have IIS running. Let's think here now. It'll run on the default port 80 unless you change something. And remember where we were doing IIS Express, you could have conflicts if you had both web servers running. But if you're not running your IIS Express, this would be the only web server you have going, and you'd be good to go. Also, it'll look for files. Your install files hopefully are somewhere on your hard drive. If not, you might have to dig up a CD or something so that it can find the install files it needs. But once that's installed, let's close here. We can go and I'll type IIS, and you should be able to find this link or icon or app after you get that installed. And you might have to look at admin tools. Some versions of Windows will have that, but somewhere digging around you should be able to find the Internet Information Services Manager link once you have this installed. When you fire that guy up, it's going to look like this, and to the left is your machine. That is your server or your client machine, and it has sites, the websites you have installed, and out of the box it will just have the default website. Now we can actually check and make sure this is running. Like if I fire up a browser, and I had already done that, but if I kill that and go back to localhost here again and make sure I'm going to get rid of that port because I want the default port on this one, it should find your web server. It should look like that. Internet Information Services is running. Now, a neat thing to know if you're new to this is the default directory that it stores websites in. Matter of fact, while we're here, let's just go, I'm right-clicking that default website, right-clicking, and I should be able to go like, there's manage website like advanced settings. There's probably 2 different ways or more to get there, but something to be aware of is that the default path is your system drive inetpub www. That's good to know if you're new to IIS, that that's the default spot that it makes websites and where you'll put your files and things. Notice it's on whatever your system drive is. You might, in the real world, if you're on a server or something, you might point that to like a non-operating system drive so your websites don't fill your root drive and things of that nature, but there's the default. So if we get out of here and we go look in that folder, I'll drop to DOS, or a command prompt I should say, that CMD trick we learned in the last video, and we go look, get to the root, and it's saying inetpub is there, and there it is. And remember, there was a www root folder inside there. Taking another directory, and there's those files that are making that default site appear for you. Now this, I tried this a second ago, and you're going to see something here. I'll bet you've already fought this, but if not, what I call that, the School of Hard Knocks, or something like I said in the last video. If I try to do Notepad and I want to show you, I could make a web page here in my server, like let's call it test.html, and I'll just say, do you want to create a new one? Yeah. I'll just say hi, and I'll go to save that. I believe I'm going to get an error. Yeah, or it's prompting me. And if I try to force it there, I could type it, it'll say don't have permission, have to be an admin. Now let's see if we can get this to work right here. I'm going to try opening the command prompt, but I'm going to say run as administrator. And let's see what happens here. I'm going to say yes. And let's see if this doesn't work. We got more tricks up our sleeve, but I'm going to go to inetpub, to www.root, notepad, test.html, and in case it fails, I'm just going to put hi again so I don't waste time. Let's save. And I think we did work like I hoped. That's one nice thing about the Visual Studio Code we showed you last week. If you had done this with Visual Studio Code instead of Notepad, it actually lets you try it as admin and kind of walks you through the prompt to log in as admin. But beware of this. There are folders on your Windows drive that you have to be an admin to edit the files in, or you'll get errors like that. So now, be thinking in your head, how would I go see that page? I just made a test.html file on my server. What's the address of my web server? Well, it's localhost, and I don't want the default page. I want to look specifically at that page now, and hopefully, bam, if you can see that there, I do have my word hi showing up on that page. Now, something that's neat, and there's no right answer to this. Different companies I've been at have done different things, but one of my buddies, when this kind of jump into a meatier topic, but we talked about installing different websites. Instead of everything being on the default website, you might install an application as its own app or on its own website or DNS entry. And what we did on that one was, instead of burying it in the www root, we would go up a folder, and like if I were going to make an app like, we'll call it our demo, I would make like a demo directory app. And I'll go ahead and CD into demo, and I'm going to make a page. I think I'm still in that. Yeah, it says it up there. Look at that. It even says, I was paying attention there, administrator. I'm still in as administrator. I'm going to say, I'll call it index.html. I am making a new web page in the root of that new folder that is not the www root. And I'll put, yes, new one. This is the demo site. I'm going to hit save. I'm going to close that, shrink this back down so it quits going crazy on us. But if all goes well here, what we're going to do is say, I want to make a new website. Again, we're kind of jumping ahead, but we'll call it our demo website. And it's like, well, where do you want this website to come from? And I'll say, well, I want it to come from inetpub, that directory we just made. Browsing would be easier, of course. Demo. And for now, I'm going to leave it on port 80. Let's think about this. Yeah, let's change our host name. Watch this. I'm gonna show you a couple neat things right now that I'm gonna make a demo, a DNS entry. Now that's, again, I think we barely mentioned that last one, but it's a new concept. So let's show it. When I go to demo DNS entry, I'm going to say on my default port or my default app is going to be this guy right here. Now watch this. So we're going to hit OK. Now, what's neat or what's not neat, what's just learning, if you're more advanced, you already know this. I can't just go to demo. It's hard to tell what's going to happen here. Jump out on the web, who knows what that would do. But some neat trick. This is the old dog trick stuff, and I'll probably need my administrator thing again. So let's do administrator. If you dig around in CD Windows and in System 32, I believe it is, and then I think it's drivers, and then an etc, etc, or something. Why that's there, I do not know. Maybe that stands for something else. But there is a host file. And this is a powerful thing to be aware of as a developer. And when you are using DNS entries and things, I can edit that file, hosts. And what this file does, even more neat stuff if you didn't notice, you can define what text goes to what IP address on the network. And notice these are rimmed out, but this is one way that, well, actually it's not rimmed out. Look down here. We've got like some local host entries. That's how your computer knows to come back to itself, the loopback address, or its own local address, if you will, not loopback necessarily. But I can come in here and say, hey, you know what? I also want that IP address. When I say demo, I want you to come to there. So now, in a sense, it's treating that just like localhost. Let's see here. Now, I'll bet this doesn't work. Let's try this. Ooh, you remember how last time we had to close our window on something? I can't remember what it was. Oh, environment variable in the path. This time, that took in the host file without having to close and open my window. But look at that. Now your computer knows, hey, when I say demo, go to this computer, which is my own computer. Let's try something else out of orness. Let's try the same, back to my own computer. I'm going to act like, you know, www.demo.com. I think, you know, we can even use dots in our names. Ping www.demo.com. And look at that. It's back to my site. So we can fake like that DNS entry already exists. That's a whole lesson in itself about domain naming servers and almost like a library of all these names to look up. How your local network, if you're at a company, will have that. And then it goes out into the world, if you will, and there's domain name servers out on the internet that keep track of all these things and help us use friendly human names instead of computer numbers. But now, you know what? I think it already refreshed or something there on me, but look at that. Instead of getting not found now, look at that. It now knows my demo site's there. Isn't that neat? Isn't that neat? Now I could use the same name. This is what's neat. Let's make a new site, add a website, and I'm going to make the folder first so I don't get an error. Let me jump out here, and I'll go inetpub. I'll go to, well, I won't go to www. I want to make like make directory demo bind. Demo bind. I'm going to show you how another port can be set up to be tossed in a website. So we'll change into that demo bind subdirectory, and I'm going to make another, let's just call it index.html file, and I'll say, yes, new file. This is demo bound to, I'll put 9090. I think that's what I plan on using. So we're actually going to use that same DNS entry and show another website. So let me close that. Let's add another website and say, hey, this one is going to be called demo bind, or it can be whatever. It doesn't have to match the folder. And we'll put that it's the inetpub demo bind folder. And we'll say, I want to use the host name entry or DNS entry demo, but this time I want to serve it up when they come at me with port 9090. I know this is a lot of new stuff for newbies, but it's pretty cool. So let's try that now. If I go to my browser, let's see what happens here. If I go to just localhost, oh, I'm playing tricks on you now. What's that going to do? I'm not using my DNS entry. That's just the default website. If I say, hey, I want to go to demo, so that's using the default port 80. What's that going to do? The same site we looked at last time. But if I say, hey, I want to go to demo on port 9090, let's see if it works. This is the demo bound to 9090. So I know that was a lot of material quick, but we looked at IIS, at least getting installed. how you have a default website, what folder it's in. We looked at adding other websites. We looked at even using different ports to bind. We looked at using your host entry file. One great example of that is if you're making a program somewhere and you're wanting to bind to a particular name and the system admins have not yet made that DNS entry for you yet, you can test it. You can, on your machine or your user's machine, have things configured with that host file so you can test ahead of time and know, hey, this is going to work once that DNS entry is made. Well, there's, as always, some cleanup once we're done talking. It's very likely if you're working at a company, if you're not on your home machine, you're not going to have admin rights. So you're probably not going to be able to edit your host file. But hopefully, or if you're at home, you should have those admin perms. Or if you are in the IT group, gain enough skill with these videos, you'll be in the IT group and you'll gain admin access, maybe eventually be able to even do that on the company network. So admin rights needed to even edit the host file. We threw out the word ping there, and I think we had talked about that maybe in the last video, but CMD, it's almost like throwing a ping pong ball out at another site. And by using DNS entry there, demo, you see if it replies or not. And pay attention to the errors, because if I ping something that's not legit, you should get it. Couldn't find that host even. I don't even know what you're talking about, fake bad. And sometimes even if you have a real entry, if the network's down, it'll respond that it could not be found, that the connection's not working at that point in time. It's kind of a cross here of developing and system things. The more you know about how the system itself works, and this aims toward being, if you will, what they're calling full stack developer now. You'll find some newer developers that might not know the back end, networking, configuring the server. They just bang code. But as you grow, the more these pieces you know, the more power it gives you, and things of that nature. So that was pinging, using DNS, looking up. You'll want to clean up your host file too. Nothing worse than if you leave that host entry and it's what's making you work, and maybe you come back the next week and they haven't made the DNS entry and you ping, oh, it's working. Well, you forgot to get rid of your host entry, so clean that up. Another neat thing, it's good for jokes. Hey, have a little fun here. You can, if you have those perms. This is why they don't give everybody these perms. You could change where a host entry goes on somebody and they go somewhere and it goes to the wrong site. I had a boss blame me for getting Viagra commercials because I'd pointed his to Viagra once, and he claimed that's why he was getting all these ads from them, because I faked the DNS entry or something. But again, that's why we don't give everybody admin rights, because it can be abused. So let's look at this before we pack it up. The IIS server, several things that apply to what we did today. If I click on a site, you'll see there's a bunch of icons. And one of them is authentication. We mentioned that. And if I click that, you'll see that default installed, I have like basic authentication, anonymous authentication, and we're not going into detail today, but there's like Windows authentication and digest authentication that you might add in some of those feature setups we added earlier. Another neat thing, if I click that website again, the default document. Remember, I was making index.html page, and because I wanted it to show up automatically. Well, that's because it's configured, hey, look for any of these pages. If you find one, that's the page I want you to toss. Well, I was doing index.html, and there it was. It tossed that page for us. So many other things here that you'll get into as you grow, logging directories and things, but neat stuff. One other thing I had jotted down here, and we'll be done for today, where we had that binding demo to two things. That's very useful when you get into APIs and the newer single page applications. when we make apps, it's nice to only have to make one DNS entry for that app. So like maybe, who knows, demo, like we did. I install my web pages, my JavaScript pages, if you will, my framework front end at default port 80. But when we install the API backend on the same server, if it is on the same server, bind it to like port 9090. So the same DNS entry works for the app. Default shows the web pages. The app itself is calling on port 9090 to its own backend or API. Now, depending on segregation and who knows, some of this newer container stuff, that might not be applicable, but it's one other neat use of binding the same DNS entry to the same port. So much more, but I hope we're building your skill set of things that you'll be able to use in coming years.